What's good, guys? Wait, let me do that one more time. What's good, guys? Ace of the Basic here, and today I will be giving my review on Spider-Man Brand New Day. Now, before we move forward, this is a spoiler review, so if you don't want to be spoiled, click off now. Now, last night I went to the movie theaters to watch this movie, and I came back amazed, and this is my reaction right here. I just got back. Wow. It's the best Tom Holland movie. It might be the best live action Spider-Man. It might be. It was peak. I loved it. And before I go into my full-on rating of the movie, I will be giving you a quick summary. We see a Peter Parker who is living the effects of post No Way Home, where no one remembers him, where he's seeing Ned and MJ live a life without him, without a memory of him, and he's sort of being alone as Peter Parker and Spider-Man, fighting different villains, where we see the Hand, Tombstone, and even Scorpion, and other villains as well that are more niche, like I think there's Tarantula. Anyways, we see like a comp montage of that. And that's something we really pick up in the movie, with Spider-Man going after this tank that's rampaging through the city. That's when we see the first appearance of Punisher, which honestly, in this movie, Punisher was just himself. This is the best we've seen of Punisher probably since Daredevil Season 2. Just chef's kiss. Amazing. I love the dynamic between Peter Parker and Punisher. It was funny, but it wasn't too funny where it took away from Punisher's character. So that was amazing, that dynamic between the two. And honestly, that made me want more of Punisher in a Spider-Man environment, because that was just amazing. Anyways, we see Spider-Man take down the tank, which you see an old woman in there, and that's when we first come across the secret anonymous character who is mind controlling, who jumps from the old woman to a guard, from a guard to a construction worker. And Spider-Man is the only one that can see through this and see that there is a mind control possession going on, which he chases them, and they end up getting away with Scorpion. Then we see Spider-Man go on this investigation of who this is and what's going on, where he goes to Yelena for help, which she tells him that this is possession, Peter. This is possession. Like, this is not mind control. Which then, Peter really makes that acknowledgement. And then we see Peter come across Ned and MJ and try to peek into their lives as he's lonely. And that's when he sees MJ have a boyfriend and kisses him. And that's when he goes through this break where he's swinging through the city. And ultimately, when he gets back to his apartment, he passes out. And this is when he endures a mutation, where he gets an enhanced spider sense, natural web fluid, and other enhanced abilities as well that we see throughout this movie, actually. And at first, Peter really doesn't take this as good. He wants to really limit himself because he doesn't know how to control it that well, which he ends up consulting Bruce Banner, where he's able to make a device, which I forgot what it is, an inhibitor. I think it's an inhibitor that basically limits his DNA to match his human DNA. But even with that on, we do see him break through with these black eyes, which honestly, that's when we come across the possession character again, that possesses MJ, who tricks Peter into thinking that she remembers, but then she reveals herself, and that's when Peter just breaks again. That's when we really start to feel a dislike for this character. And on the other end, we're introduced to Damage Control, who appears to be a good organization who's turning the good or the bad into the good, which we see them turn the Hand into a good force where they use. We're given this plot that Peter needs to protect Damage Control because obviously this mind control possession character is trying to get something from them, which they have in a vault. Now, about midway into the film, Peter does some investigation and he finally finds out that this is Jean Grey, who we know from the X-Men, but this is obviously no one in the MCU to anyone because she isn't really a character yet. After finding out she's Jean Grey, there's this whole confrontation at Damage Control where Jean Grey is trying to break in with the Hulk. But something happens where Jean Grey basically loses control of the Hulk, and basically this is when Bruce Banner's himself, and he doesn't have the inhibitor anymore, and that's when he turns into the Hulk that we know and love. This is the best Hulk that we've seen in years. If you haven't watched the movie yet, you'll be amazed. This is just, you're getting that scary vibe from the Hulk. I really hope that we see much more of him, but we see this fight of Punisher and Spider-Man versus the Hulk where Spider-Man defeats the Hulk just by getting to him mentally, emotionally. That's where we see the last of the Hulk in the movie. And basically, Jean Grey, she controls the Punisher to break into the vault, which everyone's hiding at Damage Control. But since the Hulk is now defeated, Peter then is able to come there in time and basically take out Jean Grey. And this is when it's the scenario of, okay, we caught the villain. But this is when Jean Grey, before she passes out from the inhibitor that Peter Parker places on her, we hear her say the name Sarah. And this is when we start to feel for Jean Grey as a character. And there's a dynamic that switches. As Damage Control years prior captured her sister Sarah, which she does say her name as she passes out, Sarah. And this is when we start to see that Jean Grey maybe isn't evil, but rather just broken and trying to save her sister. And this is when we start to paint Damage Control as a bad guy in this movie, and which they are. She gets captured, and it starts to get revealed that her sisters died, and they were testing on her. Once Jean Grey figures out that her sister is dead, she really loses control and goes past her limits. Her powers are all enhanced, and this is when we see a scene where she basically freezes a huge part of New York, which in the center is the Damage Control prison or facility, which this final scene takes place, where Jean Grey is trying to take out the leader of the Damage Control, which I forgot his name, sorry. On the other hand, we see Spider-Man find out that Damage Control is really the bad guy in this movie, is really the bad entity in this movie. And this is when he goes to try to save Jean Grey, which she happens to save herself and break free. But this is when we get this confrontation between him and Jean Grey, where she's trying to kill the guy, the leader of the Damage Control, while Spider-Man is trying to get her to stop. And this is when she uses the hand, takes control of the hand, and basically fights Peter. And this is when we see him let his mutation take control, which he's been fighting this whole movie. This is when he beats the hand, and we see him do a lot of these moves, and it's an amazing fight. And basically, this is when he's finally able to confront Jean Grey. And at this part of the movie, this is when Jean Grey tries to get in his mind, and we see a scene of him and Aunt May, which Jean Grey sees, and there's this emotional scene where Jean Grey really starts to calm down, and this is when Peter Parker, Spider-Man, sits next to her and basically tells her that he's there for her. And exactly while this is happening, Punisher's on the building far away with a sniper, and he thinks that Jean Grey is still, a big bad, and basically he shoots, and while the bullet is about to hit her, Peter, with his spider sense, jumps in the way. In doing so, he is shot and basically about to die. He tells Jean Grey to go. And this is when we see a cut of Punisher carrying Spider-Man to the hospital, and him in the hospital bed. And we come to find out that Jean Grey really took control of Spider-Man to breathe for him so he stays alive, which we see her kind of let go and release once he wakes up. which was a very crazy detail. But anyways, this is when we see Punisher kind of apologize and have a little moment with Peter. And yeah, this is the end of the movie where things start to look good, and Spider-Man trying to figure out where Jean Grey is. In the final scenes, we see Peter take this acknowledgement that he's not going to do this by himself while talking to, Aunt May at her grave. Not like literally, but, just talking. And one thing I left out is Zendaya MJ doesn't remember him and won't. However, he does approach Ned in the last scene. And this is when he goes in for a handshake. And this is when muscle memory kicks in for Ned. And he remembers Peter Parker. And this is when it ends. And we're left with that Ned remembers. Honestly, this movie, I know I gave a quick summary and I may have left out a detail or two or many more. But this movie was amazing and definitely the best Spider-Man movie we've seen in live action. Arguably, definitely the best Tom Holland movie. The characters that this movie had did not overshadow Spider-Man. Anyways, the action was amazing. The cinematography was amazing. 10 out of 10. The plot wasn't perfect, but I will give that a 9 out of 10. Overall, this movie definitely was a 9 out of 10. I will give it that. It was a first Tom Holland movie that felt like he wasn't Tony Stark Jr. That felt like he was really Spider-Man. Jean Grey, I really can't wait to see how she's handled in the future of the MCU, and they really built on her character, and it was cool to see her have this connection with Peter Parker, which seems to be a brother-sister bond, which maybe we'll see in the future. That was a good dynamic. Like I said, Punisher, that made me want to see more of their dynamic as Peter and Punisher. The Hulk, he ends up in the mental institution, it seems like, and that's worrying, but hopefully he gets a solo movie, which honestly, we heard with Mark Ruffalo pitch. And then, in the post-credit scene, we see a spider tracker, which Ned Leeds made in the movie. Well, not in the movie, but behind the scenes in the movie. And this spider tracker basically says, no Spider-Man is not detected. Spider-Man is not detected. And that's when we see that it moves to space. And it says, Spider-Man detected, where he's in space now. Now, what could this mean? Honestly, it probably means that Spider-Man's in Doomsday or Secret Wars and transported to Battle World or something. But anyways, I love this movie, and I don't care if it's recency bias, but it really is probably the best live-action Spider-Man movie that we have seen. Spider-Verse is always on top, and is that animation, chef's kiss. But this really encaptured the Spider-Man. The only Spider-Man movies that can compare are definitely Tobey Spider-Man movies, probably Spider-Man 1 and 2. But other than that, definitely all the Tom and Andrew Garfield movies, definitely better. But yeah. But anyways, that was my review. Thank you for watching the video. Thank you for watching my review. And yeah, like and subscribe. And yeah, I'll see you tomorrow. Peace. Dare I say that Tom Holland is approaching best Spider-Man status.